to this launch event for the version 1.2 of the CMIP7 Data Request. In today's event, we'll give you a quick overview of the new data request structure and a couple of notes on how the version 1.2 of the CMIP7 data request is different from CMIP6's data request. And then we'll move on to having an overview of the content of the data request from some of our thematic leads. And finally, we'll hear an overview of the software package that's available for you to navigate the request with. So just as a quick overview, some of you may have seen this before, but the CMIP7 data request has got a slightly new structure following a lot of consultation from the CMIP6 data request. So the request has these three layers. The first one is this core request. So this was devised via the baseline climate variables process, which you may have heard of. And the idea here is that there is a core set of variables which is requested from pretty much every MIP experiment. And the idea behind this is to generate a really consistent data archive for users. So there is a set of variables that they know will be available for hopefully every experiment they want to look into. So both the process and the variables requested for this core request is available in a paper on GMD now called the Baseline Climate Variables. So the second layer, which is really what we're going to be focusing on today, is the harmonized data request. So the content for this has been devised by our thematic author teams, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a little bit. But the idea here is to generate a coordinated request from selected experiments, and the data from this data request is aimed to be delivered on the fast track timelines. And this has been developed across our 5 themes, which you can see on the right-hand side here. And as I said, this is what we're mainly going to be talking about today. And the latest version of this is the version 1.2.1, which was released on the 26th of April, just a couple of weeks ago. And finally, just a quick note on this unharmonized request. This is kind of an idea to allow the community MIPs to request data with more flexibility on the timelines that they need data on. But just to note that this hasn't yet been implemented, and the data request task team are currently looking into how this will work best in the future. So the actual content of the request itself is also structured in a slightly different way to CMIP6. So following feedback from CMIP6, modelling centres wanted more justification on why certain variables were requested, so they could understand what they really needed to produce to help support specific scientific objectives. So in response to this, the data request task team came up with a structure where the data request is now organized via what we call opportunities. An opportunity is an identified use case or scientific objective which can support community decision-making and helps data producers understand the priorities and intended data use. So these opportunities really help to provide a structure to map variables against their scientific requirements. And each opportunity description conveys why a combination of variables and experiments is important and how they can contribute to the impact of that data. So as I said, these are a combination of experiments and variables. So how this works is an opportunity links any number of experiment groups and variable groups together. So both of these are non-exclusive groupings. So for an experiment group, an example might be the scenarios, or it might be the deck, or it might be something a bit more specific, say CF-MIP fast track experiments. And the variable groups, again, is a non-exclusive grouping of variables. So examples here might be the monthly time slices of the baseline climate variables, or daily variables required for this particular opportunity. Those sorts of things are what we're looking at here. And so to gather the set of opportunities, the set of experiment groups, and the set of variable groups that are required for CMIP7, the CMIP data request task team have worked together with community representative leads in this process called the harmonized thematic variables. The aim of this was to devise a controlled list of high priority variables that both facilitate the majority of the user needs in CMIP7 whilst also keeping the request as small as possible, which obviously was not an easy task to achieve. And the harmonization here is the process of ensuring that those scientific goals are supported by the data requests whilst staying conscious of the resource limitations, and understanding the need for concise and efficient data request. So as previously mentioned, this was done across 5 themes. So we have the atmosphere theme, Earth system, impacts and adaptation, land and land ice, and ocean and sea ice. And our 5 thematic groups were recruited via a public call for team members, and each theme contains members of MIPs, community activities, modelling centres, and together they've pulled together the content for this request. This process has been a big expansion on the engagement that was done during CMIP6, which has really been to its benefit. We've had 106 authors from 25 countries, and this is a much bigger kind of global reach in the organisation of the data request than before. But the data request task team also appreciates that there are some regions here that are still not well represented, and potentially future work should look to address these, for example, South America and Africa. So just a few quick notes on how this request has been put together. So firstly, opportunity proposals, both from the thematic teams themselves, as well as from the wider community, were proposed. So each opportunity was then designated a lead theme, which kind of organised its review and made decisions on how to proceed with that opportunity. And whilst other themes were also able to input on their specific scientific areas. And then following those proposals, there was a lot of work that went on by the thematic teams, as well as across thematic group, to merge or in very few cases reject opportunities. And this was just to ensure that we didn't have, say, 2 opportunities requesting the same scientific opportunity. In addition to this gathering of the opportunities, variable groups and experiment groups, there was also a big review on the technical variable definitions. This was done by some of our thematic group members, as well as CMIP technical groups, such as the data request task team and the control vocabularies task team. Obviously, this was a lot of work and there were a lot of issues raised. So most of this consultation was done via Airtable, but there was also spreadsheets as well as GitHub issues and offline discussions. And just to note that some of this discussion is still ongoing on GitHub, but we're hoping to close that off very soon. And finally, with each release of the data request we've done, followed a public consultation. And this was where modelling centres and MIPs were invited to provide feedback on the request from the opportunity level all the way down to the variable level if they wanted to. And so some of this you may have remembered and you may have received emails about in the past few months. So just to answer a quick question that may be on your mind on will there be any more releases? So the main thing I've kind of referenced today is our latest release, version 1.2.1 of the CMIP7 assessment fast track data request content. In CMIP, following CMIP6, a lot of the negative feedback about the data request focused on the fact that there were too many releases and that these were done on quite an ad hoc timescale, which meant implementing the request in modelling centre workflows really, really difficult. So to address that, the data request task team have worked really hard to pre-publish timelines of the expected releases and to limit themselves to just a small number of releases in this early part of 2025. Due to some feedback that we've had later on in the process, we have had to have these last 2 releases, version 1.2.1 and 1.2.2, to implement a few final changes. But just to note that the next release, this 1.2.2, is planned to be the final release of the data request content. The planned release date for this is the 20th of June. We are aware that not everything will be fixed for this final release. We are requesting that modelling centres, any issues that are found or MIPs, to put them on our GitHub repo, which we can share the details of. But there is no guarantee that the data request task team will release another version to fix these errors. However, if significant issues are raised, which sort of affect the implementation of the data request for a lot of groups, this may require an additional update. But in this scenario, the data request task team will really make sure that any changes are made really clear in the release notes, so modelling centres know exactly what has changed from the previous release. So just to move on to a few overall stats about the content, the thematic author team reps will kind of give you a bit more of a detailed insight into the content, but we have in our version 1.2.1, 46 opportunities, which are requesting a total of 1,863 variables. Of these, 415 are new variables, but only just under 200 of those are actually new parameters. So the remaining just over 200 new variables are just new temporal or spatial samplings of existing parameters. And these are requested across 188 variable groups. So just a couple of quick comparisons to CMIP6 for those of you who are maybe really familiar with the CMIP6 content. So in CMIP6, the request was compiled across a XML database with HTML web pages. In CMIP7, we've used a cloud-hosted database called Airtable to compile the request, and we will maintain that for kind of users to view and click through the request. But we've also exported that into a JSON file, and the technical team, which you'll hear from a little bit later, have developed a Python API in a community GitHub repo to help you use the request content programmatically. And just a note on the content and priority changes from CMIP6 to CMIP7. So in CMIP6, there were a total of 2,062 variables. We have reduced that a little bit in CMIP7 to 1,863. But the main change is really in the prioritization of those variables. So in CMIP6, over 50% of those 2,000 variables were requested at the highest priority or priority 1, which obviously made for quite a difficult picture for data producers. In CMIP7, as previously mentioned, with the baseline climate variables, that is our highest priority data set, and that is only about 7% of our overall request. In addition to those, we have high, medium, and low priorities in the CMIP7 request. And the reason for this big difference in numbers here is in CMIP6, there was a lot of flexibility for the MIPs in assigning the priorities to variables, which made a really complex picture for the data producers. We've kind of flipped that around in CMIP7, and there's been quite an inflexible system for the data requesters, which has obviously led to them having to make some really quite difficult choices. But hopefully that's made a clearer picture for data producers for making the data. Another change in CMIP7 is on how variables are named. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this because we are planning on doing a session dedicated to this in the future. But I just wanted to flag it to people as this new naming system is now available from version 1.2.1 onwards. So this new system is called branded variables, and it's been created to really address some of the issues with earlier naming system. So an example I pulled out here is a variable that all of you will know well. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see what its new name will be. So the idea of this new system is that it provides much more information on the temporal and spatial sampling of a variable in its name directly. So here, this is called the suffix of the variable, these 4 terms at the end. So you can see that there's a term which tells you a little bit about the temporal sampling, something about the vertical sampling, something about the horizontal sampling, and finally something about the area type. So the precise implementation of this system is still being tweaked. So some of the names might change, but those names are available in version 1.2.1. And getting these names right is one of the main reasons we've had to schedule a next release version 1.2.2. Obviously, this is a really big change to names that people will know really well to names that people don't really recognize at all yet. So to aid that transition, we've maintained both the CMIP6 era names, so amon.tas, and the CMIP7 era names, this branded variable label, in the CMIP7 request, so you can see those side by side to help you get used to the new names. So that was a very quick overview of some of the structural changes and the process of how the request was pulled together. Do we have, and this will after this move on to some updates from the thematic groups on the actual content they pulled together into their request. But there is just 5 minutes or so for any questions that anyone might have. Feel free either to raise your hand. Alternatively, we have a Padlet where you can put your questions. I think Brian has put the link in the chat if you wanted to type your questions in there. Christopher.
Hi there. I was wondering if the total number of variables will remain fixed throughout all of the following versions of the data request, right? You were saying there's 1,862 variables in CMIP7. I'm just wondering if that number is just going to remain fixed throughout all the following versions. Thank you.
I think it should remain at least mostly fixed. There's a very slim chance that one or two changes might be required, but there aren't plans to add or remove any substantial number of variables. There's also a question from Anda on what are the advancements in spatial and temporal resolution compared to CMIP6. I'm not actually sure that's a question I can answer. I don't know, John's on the call or James, if one of you two has an answer for Anda or Matt. Sorry to put you on the spot.
Sorry, is that a question about the models, the anticipated improvements in model resolution, or about say the amount of high frequency data requested? Sorry if I missed it. It's early in the morning here. Okay, about model resolution. I think John might be better qualified to answer that question. Presumably higher in general, I would guess.
Yeah, there's a anomaly. We expect some of the models to be higher resolution than last time. I'm in a high res MIP, for example. We're including half a degree as the nominal high resolution of an atmosphere last time, and then they upped that to quarter degree for this time. But so that would be the highest sort of resolution models. We expect a lot of 1 degree atmosphere models and down to say quarter degree ocean models.
Thanks, John. Any other last questions? If not, feel free to pop things in the Padlet if you think of them afterwards and we can answer them on there. But for now, I will hand over to James again for the atmosphere theme presentation.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Okay, so this is just a few very quick comments on the content of the atmosphere theme data request in CMIP7. So as Beth already described, the request is broken up into 5 themes. Atmosphere is one of them. Of course, requesting atmospheric variables has a long history in CMIP. So in this phase of CMIP, in this opportunity structure that Beth has just described, through the community consultation, we ended up with 11 opportunities under the atmosphere theme. Those are listed in this table here. This process involved consultation with a number of MIPs and the wider communities that they represent. The MIPs are listed there on the left. So the 11 opportunities include looking at atmospheric dynamics, clouds, radiative forcing, detection and attribution is under this theme, including variables requested to look at attribution to emissions. There is also opportunity, the Southern Ocean biogeochemistry to clouds. That's looking at aerosol cloud interactions in the Southern Ocean and Antarctic regions, temperature variability and extremes. And the last one there is AirChem-MIP2. That's understanding the role of atmospheric composition for air quality and climate change. I'll also note that the rapid evaluation framework, which many people are aware of, that is listed as an opportunity here under the atmosphere theme. However, it actually involves variables from all the thematic areas. Okay, next. Oh, and I just finally to say about this table, you'll note there's quite a large number of variables involved as listed in the column at the right. So it's quite a comprehensive request for the atmosphere. Beth, could you go to the next slide? Okay, thank you. So one change to note from CMIP6 is, as part of the harmonization process, there was an effort to simplify the number of vertical level grids. So we moved all daily and monthly data to PLEV 19 after determining it would, I mean, of course, increase the volume, but not enormously so. So we thought that was a reasonable simplification. However, high volume sub-daily data will still remain on a lower number of pressure levels because that could blow the volume quite a lot. But the intention of this harmonization was to make it simpler for modeling centers to output data on pressure levels. Next slide, please. Okay, and so just to briefly note, there are, well, Beth, as you already mentioned, there are a number of new physical parameters and variables in CMIP7. The list on this slide just gives a quick indication of some of those for the atmosphere. So they include a number of new optical depth aerosol parameters, heat index variables, a variety of things, some new gravity wave momentum fluxes. I won't go through all of them, but suffice to say that these are all documented in the GMD paper for the atmosphere theme that is to be submitted soon alongside the other GMD papers for the other themes, which will include this nice, lovely schematic you see on this slide here. So so yeah, for full details of the atmosphere request, those will be available in the forthcoming GMD paper, which of course is an open review process. So members of the community are very welcome to read the paper at that point and give any feedback. Okay, I think that's all I have to say on the atmosphere theme.
Thanks, James. We'll do, if you have any questions for specific themes, we have a bit of time at the end, but we'll just group together all our theme presentations for now. So if I hand over to Thomas for the Earth System theme.
Yes, thanks, Beth. So hi, everyone. This is a summary of what it is the content of the Earth System team data request for CMIP7. Here at the list of all the people participating to this collective effort in shedding some light in the data request about this theme. One thing that I like to precise here is that the Earth System team collects all those variables that are not directly related to the physical system. So it involves cycles, energy budgets, and similar. As you see, the Earth System thematic collects 8 main opportunities. These opportunities encompass a number of different topics, from global carbon cycle, benchmarking the carbon cycle, either energy and water cycles, along with biochemistries and risk assessment opportunities. All the different opportunities have different number of variable groups and their extent cover different numbers of experiment groups as well. Next one, please. Let's say that the main topics that are collected within the Earth System theme encompasses, as I said, cycles, not only of carbon, but also of different biochemical parameters. Many of these ones are new parameters that were added with respect to CMIP6. And clearly it tackles also the responses at the ecosystem level to climate change and other disturbances introduced in the system throughout the different scenarios. And again, other 2 fundamental parts are topics of this request. They are related to the energy flows and the occurrence of tipping points and critical thresholds detection. Along with these themes, I just highlighted here new groups and variables that are addressed in the request by starting with extended set of variables for land, carbon, benchmark, and attribution, along with new variables for tracking sea ice biochemistry and the ocean sediment exchanges, along with land fire variables to detect and analyze the driver and the impacts of these variables and processes, along with a number of items related to the tipping points of the Earth System processes. As already said by James, also this work will be part of the collective GMD number of publication that will document all the data requests.
Thanks, Thomas. So next we've got the impact and adaptation theme. Sylvie?
Yes. Hi everyone. So I speak of the impact and adaptation theme. For this team, we had to engage a larger community beyond those running and developing ESMs. So there has been a call for participation, which has been launched, and we have gathered a rather diverse community working on the theme. Then we have worked using mural boards along a lot of meetings, and we ended up with 13 opportunities, 60 variable group, and used to go from the ESM global simulations to the local impacts for the different sectors. So next, please. Here are the different opportunities which has been considered. You'll see there are impacts on different sectors like agriculture or energy, aviation, and health, and others, and some opportunities linked to the core of the adaptation, impact and adaptation studies, which are the downscaling and bias corrections, for which we also need some variables. And the next slide, please. So since my main work is on energy, the impact on the energy sectors, I will just focus on this sector, which both contributes to mitigation and needs to adapt. And for this sector, we had 5 opportunities, and the main request we have here is to have sub-daily variables, because the energy system has to be planned and operated at the sub-daily time scale. And this has to do with, and we have needs for the adaptation of the buildings, to compute the energy demand in the buildings, the river temperature for the generation of the power plants, thermal power plants, and there are also needs for the adaptation of the infrastructures, taking into account the potential damaging phenomenon for those infrastructure adaptations, and of course the impact on hydropower and on the planning, operation, and adaptation of the world energy system. So that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sylvie. And if we move on to the land and land ice theme, you?
Yeah, thank you, Bess. So can you go to the, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so the land and land ice, we aim to provide essential and critical land surface variables, and also in support of the other theme, because the land surface variables are pretty like fundamental to support to focus on a variety of like scientific questions. And also, this is the screenshot of the team members' photos. We have team members from many different institutes, and also with different stage of their career level. And also me and also Gang from University of Melbourne were the 2 co-leads of this team. Can you go to the next slides? Yeah, and also basically we have overall about 6 land and land ice opportunities, plus the rapid evaluation framework. So basically we are covering a varied time scale from 3 hours, for example, in CMIP7 compared to CMIP6, we have like 3 hour land and atmosphere variables. And also we have a very comprehensive hydrological variables opportunities, including the hydrological processes, water resources, and freshwater system. And also, since these opportunity, we also include like a very important component. For example, the glacier changes, their drivers and impacts. Can go to the next slides. And also, the ice sheet was first introduced to CMIP6 before, and also since CMIP6, it has been evaluated separately from many research papers, and also we will also incorporate many variables from the ice sheet mass loss, their contributions to the sea level rise, and also the fresh water flux into the climate system. And for the land surface, we also have another tool. It's called the plant phenology, which will provides the new variables to more accurately modeling the plant phenology seasonality and also the long-term trends in the Earth system models. And also the land use change is very fundamental. And also we will see in CMIP7, there's still a lot of opportunities to explore not only like the deforestation, but also to potentially incorporate like irrigation or the subgrid heterogeneity components. Next slide, please. Yeah, so basically the new things for land and land ice from CMIP6 to CMIP7. So as I said, we have many of the components, they have been individually separately evaluated from the since the CMIP6 efforts. And for CMIP7, we are very excited about the potential like more comprehensive integration or the interactions between these land and land ice components, and also the improvement of the process within the land and land ice will also give us the opportunity to use Earth system model to identify new feedback mechanism. For example, from land use to ice to the cryosphere dynamics, including the whole Earth system Earth system. And also all of these new variables we have are aiming to be the critical and also more accurate like boundary conditions for the other teams. Next slide, please, maybe. Okay, yeah. So anyway, so during these whole processes, we have some key reflections. Since our team, we have many people, especially from the modeling center. So we realized it may be important to directly connect to the opportunities with the modeling groups, since the opportunities being proposed will be more straightforward and also can be more rigorous, being constrained by the actual modeling framework. And also we have corrected a couple of like variables, for example, the soil moisture at different depths, which has some errors from the previous efforts. And also lastly, we would highlight that there's potentially a need to propose like unified data requests, to more reduce the pain for the future efforts. I think that's all I have.
Thanks, you. Yeah. And lastly, we have the oceans and sea ice theme. And for this, we actually have a video that I think Eleanor's going to share. Sorry, Eleanor, we can't actually hear the video at the moment.
Hi there, I'm Baylor Fox-Kemper from Brown University in the United States, and today I'm representing the Ocean and Sea Ice Thematic Team, which is part of the CMIP Data Request. Here's our team, which has a wide geographic diversity, scientific diversity, other aspects of diversity as well. I co-led this team together with Patricia de Repentier from Belgium, and the two of us tried to guide this team into coming to a consensus about some of the most important data to gather from the ocean and sea ice components of climate systems. It's important to note that our scientific diversity represents model users, oceanographers, polar climate scientists, model developers, process scientists, as well as global scientists. In consultation with our communities, we came together to center around 7 opportunities and then 1 rapid evaluation framework set of data, which was developed by the Rapid Evaluation Task Team. The first 2 are really about basic phenomena, continuity with the previous modeling systems, and the key drivers and impacts of ocean changes and sea ice changes. The remaining 5 really address new questions or questions that require different variables. And for example, the polar amplification is a critical process to explain why the regions of the Earth that have been warming the fastest and are projected to warm faster still in the future, what the underlying processes are that are both oceanographic and involving sea ice in the polar oceans. Really new for CMIP7, we, in addition to continuing the key representation of oceanic and cryospheric dynamics and the key process mechanistic representation within those model components, we also noted that surface gravity waves are an important new piece of the modeling system. For quite a while now, surface gravity waves have been run after the fact as an impact coming from high frequency winds, high frequency ocean surface currents. That continues in this CMIP7 data request. One of the opportunities pertains to that kind of process, but there's also a new opportunity which pertains to ocean surface gravity waves that are included as part of the modeling system, so as a subcomponent. So along with the wave fields, which are now collected for the first time, we'll be collecting some of the connected data, such as the mixed layer depth, that might reflect some of the processes that those waves enable. Ocean extremes are a topic of increasing interest. It has both a coastal and fisheries impact. Things like marine heat waves can affect those sensitive ecosystems, but also low oxygen and high acidification events can be highly variable on short time scales. And so those variables are collected only near the ocean surface and at high frequency in order to capture those phenomena. We also paid a lot of attention to new model developments, such as complex choices of the vertical coordinates. Many models now have this capability, and a lot of choices are being made between different modeling systems, different model instances, in which vertical coordinates are used over which depth ranges or pressure ranges or density ranges, as the case may be. That means that cross-comparison across the models down to, say, a particular hydrostatic pressure in order to compare to observations is becoming increasingly complex to do after the fact. So a few of our new variables were really dedicated to that kind of process, where we can really easily compare to hydrographic data that have been collected observationally. So this data request extends from model into comparison to societal and economic benefits, including adaptation and projection of coastal hazards, as we've noted many of these opportunities pertain to. So at the end of this process, we reflected back on what had gone well and what hadn't gone that well. And I think it's clear that future model generations are going to involve even more data, more complex data structures, such as unstructured grids, hybrid machine learning, dynamical models, and more and new questions about how the Earth works and what we can do to conserve and protect it. CMIP needs to grow and evolve in order to accommodate this increasing complexity, but also maintain some degree of backward compatibility. That was really our goal in this data request, both of those aspects. But we also noted in the age of AI and benchmark data sets, which are really a key tool that draws in collaborations with data scientists in order to build things like emulators and surrogate models of those data, we really think that co-development of the data request with the data sciences community would have improved this process and maybe also the results. Thank you very much.
Great, so thank you to all of our theme representatives. We have a couple of minutes left for any questions that anybody might have. So again, there's a link in the chat to the Padlet, or feel free to pop your hand up. So while people are thinking of questions, we've had one for the oceans theme. I don't know, Eleanor, if you're able to answer this, as we're missing quite a few of our ocean team members, or maybe Anne-Marie. From Anda asking, does CMIP7 incorporate ocean dynamics related variables such as wave height, wave periods, and currents?
Well, for waves, I think that Baylor's presentation made clear that there are new opportunities related to that and new variables. For currents, they have always been there. I mean, they are called UO and VO, the horizontal component, and WVO for the vertical component of ocean currents. So what has changed perhaps is more emphasis on having daily variables, for example, for the surface currents, and also having the time slices of high temporal resolution currents for downscaling needs, for example.
Thanks very much. Have we got any other questions? If not, again, feel free to pop things in the Padlet, and we can come back to them. But we will move on now to a description of the software package that will be available. So I will hand over to James, who will present again this next bit.
Thanks, Beth. Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, as Beth has mentioned, there is a software package for the data request hosted on GitHub. This is a snapshot here of the release page with the arrow pointing to the link where you can access this from. Next slide, please. So yeah, as Beth mentioned earlier, the purpose of the software is to provide an API to allow you to use the data request content programmatically. So the purpose of this slide is to explain exactly what that means. The box at the top, Airtable database, that refers to the cloud platform Airtable that Beth has already mentioned, that hosts the data request content and provides a nice web interface for you to browse the content. You can read opportunities, you can follow links to variable groups, and so forth. In order to create an archivable version of this content as something that can be version controlled as well, we export that content to a large JSON file. Okay, so that's the middle box on this slide that says JSON export. Okay, this file is hosted in a GitHub repo, which is listed there. However, the intention is not for it to be directly accessed by users. It's not a particular, even though it's JSON, it's not a particularly friendly format to read, and we do not recommend using this file directly. Instead, we have created the data request software, the Python API, that's the box at the bottom, which loads that JSON export and acts as an interface to it, providing functionality to query it, to browse through the content, and to use it in modeling center workflows, which importantly includes an offline mode to support workflows in which you shouldn't need to rely on accessing the internet. And that's one of the reasons also to have a JSON export, so you can download the content, the data request in its entirety without having to somehow communicate with Airtable. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so here's a snapshot of the front page of the repo for the software. The software can be simply installed with a pip install. It's available on the Python package index. It's also possible to try it without installing. using a notebook in Binder or Google Colab, and there's a link for that near the top of the README. Next slide, please. And what is in the software? Okay, so it's a few command line utilities, a series of Jupyter notebooks that give examples of how to use it, and also some scripts and example output. So the command line utilities include, first of all, there's a config utility. This is mentioned at the top here, just to remind you, that's the part where you can set it to offline mode, as well as control some other configuration options. Export data request lists, that second one, that I'll explain more about that in a moment, but basically it gives you lists of variables that are requested for any given experiment as a function of the opportunities that you choose to support. Because, as Beth already mentioned, the data request is structured into opportunities, and any modeling center might choose to support all of them, but also may choose to only support a subset of them. And then the question is, well, if I'm choosing to support a subset, what does that imply for the variables I need to produce? This utility is intended to answer that question. There are also utilities to estimate the volume of output, to return the metadata of variables, and also to compare variables across different data request versions so that you can find out for a given variable if anything has changed, if a new version comes out. This can also be used to compare to the CMIP6 definitions of variables where they exist. The notebooks go through, are intended as a how-to guide to show you how to import and load the data request content, to discover what's in it, to filter through it, to find experiments variables as a function of opportunity, basically to use the API and to explore what it can do as far as understanding the data request content and using it in modeling workflows. And then finally, the scripts directory has a couple of scripts that the intention is basically the same as the notebooks. They're just in the form of scripts, not notebooks, as well as two example files, one of which is an example of the output of the export direct lists command line utility. That's the requested JSON file there. So basically lists of variables by experiment, and with the variables also separated by priority level. And then the other one is basically a flat list of variables that shows the metadata for all these variables, which includes the information that would appear in a CMOR table. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just a snapshot of one of the example notebooks showing you how to discover what is in the data request. So a simple way to use this, from the front page of the repo, there are some links at the very top where you can just click on it. It will launch Binder. Say this is from launching it in Binder, and it will load up a session in your web browser, and you can use this and explore it without having to actually install the software locally. Next slide, please. This is an illustration of the command line utility that finds requested variables by experiment. So one would run this in the shell, as this first line here shows, export direct lists. You give it the data request version that you want to use. In this case, it's specifying to use all opportunities, but that's an option. You could decide to use a subset of opportunities. And then it will tell you what variables are requested. And the example, I don't know if you can see my cursor when I move it around here, but down here is an example of the JSON file that you get. It's basically just lists of variable names. And here the variable names are using the CMIP6 versions. But as Beth mentioned earlier, CMIP7 is shifting to a new naming scheme for variables involving these branded labels. So in the software, this mapping is provided between the old and new names. Okay, and there's an example of this file, as I mentioned before, in the examples directory, and you can also produce spreadsheet summaries with information on requested variables too. Next slide, please. This is an example of the output of the get variables metadata script. So for example, showing for this variable, these various metadata parameters that would appear in a CMOR table, as well as a few others, including the branded variable name, which is down at the bottom here. Again, as Beth mentioned, this information in the data request is here. As you can see, it should be considered provisional at this stage, pending finalization of the branding algorithm. But such as it is, it's in there right now. And it's important to note this file, this metadata for any given variable here, this is not a CMOR table. The CMOR tables are in development. This is provided for modelers to make use of when beginning to implement the data request in case this is useful to them to see all this metadata in one place. And of course, because this is just using the content of the data request, which is available on Airtable, you can find all this information by browsing through Airtable as well, if that's your preferred method. But if you prefer to get it in a programmatic way using Python, you can do it with this. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. Just wanted to highlight this particular utility because this was a strong point of feedback from the questionnaires that the IPO put out to the community about the CMIP6 data request, that it's very important to understand what has changed since the previous request. Obviously, modeling centers put a lot of effort into implementing the CMIP6 data request, and no one wants to reinvent the wheel. So this utility is intended to compare variables. So the definitions of variables, the metadata that defines them, which I showed on the previous slide for one variable, between different versions. So you can basically tell it 2 versions and it will produce a summary file that tells you for any given variable, these are the attributes that have changed. And you can use it to compare to CMIP6 as well. So this may be useful for modelers who want to know, I have such and such variables implemented from CMIP6. What, if anything, do I need to change in order to implement these for CMIP7? Okay, next slide, please. And finally, I'll just mention there is a utility to estimate data volumes. The estimates should be taken with a grain of salt, but maybe the key point here is that once you produce one of those requested JSON files that list variables, you can use it as input to this program with a customizable set of model parameters that you tailor to your own model's resolution to give you an estimate of the data volume. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so finally, just to note the development plans for this software. As Beth mentioned, there is a data request content freeze from the next version that's planned, with no further updates intended unless there's a really, really strong argument for making them. The software is versioned separate from the data request content. We will certainly have another release to accommodate any changes that are in the version 1.2.2 data request content release. We leave open the possibility of other versioned releases of the software before then or after if needed in response to community feedback or of course if errors are discovered and so forth. So the software versioning is separate from the content, and the intention of the software is it doesn't only work with the latest version of the data request content, it can work with multiple versions. Just to reiterate again about Seymour tables, these are in development. The metadata example file provided in the software is not a Seymour table. It's not ready for modelers to begin implementing using Seymour. It is intended to be helpful for people beginning to implement the data request in their modeling workflows, but not the final step of Seymorization. But that is coming soon. There will be Seymour tables released soon. And finally, the software is open source, so we certainly welcome community contributions, and thanks to everyone who has already provided feedback and questions. You can provide feedback by opening issues in the software repo, and there's also a discussions forum. So yeah, I think that's all I have to say about software for now, but any questions are certainly welcome. So thank you very much.
Thank you, James. So we've got about 5 minutes left for any questions. We've had a couple in advance that I can read out whilst potentially people are thinking of any others. Again, feel free to raise your hand or pop a question in the Padlet. So I think you've addressed some of these in your presentation, but maybe just to reiterate, the CMIP6 to CMIP7 mapping, someone has asked in advance what the best route is to do this via Python.
Yeah, so currently that example, the file that was in the script examples directory, maybe could you go back a slide or two, maybe 1 or 2 more, maybe. One that had variables metadata. There, perfect. Nope. Next one. Yes, thank you. No, back one. There we go, that's it. So this file that's mentioned in the lower right corner of this slide, variables _ version 1.2.1.json. So that's produced by this command line utility. And the screenshot here for this 3-hour CLT variable, that's an example for this one variable of the metadata you get, and down at the bottom is included the branded variable name. So that's effectively a mapping from the previous name to the new branded variable name. Now, with this branded variable name alone doesn't give the reverse mapping uniquely, because you also need information about the region and frequency. But at least for going from the CMIP6 name to a branded variable name, this file gives you that mapping for now.
Thanks, James. And
Yep.
maybe to add on to that, we're also, for the next version, the 1.2.2, looking to implement a kind of CMIP7 era compound name, which should address that final point that James just made about kind of having a two-way compatible mapping. There's another question. I don't think this one's specifically data request relevant, but I'll ask it anyway. Is there a user manual available for automated data downloading through the Python API?
Does that refer to downloading CMIP data from ESGF?
I think so. So this is from Ander, who is online. I don't know if you wanted to clarify,
Okay.
Ander. Perhaps not able to unmute.
Okay.
I think it does refer to downloading
Yeah.
data. So yeah.
Okay, well, if it does refer to downloading data from ESGF, the answer is no. This software is not designed to address that. Yeah, and I guess we see that as a separate issue, where, you know, there are various ways to search ESGF and download data from it. But this software is not trying to address that question. This is trying to just help modelers and potentially users of the data request too, but mainly modelers, at least at this stage, make use of the information in the data request for the purpose of producing the data. So it's not primarily aimed at analysts who are getting the data from ESGF and analyzing it.
Thank you. And Matt, you've got your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to add.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that there is sort of an ESGF search API. I think there's a couple of them at the moment. ESG pull, for example, which you could go and have a look at to consider how you might retrieve data. But note that ESGF is going through a process where they're going to renew some of the indexes over the next few months. So some of these APIs may need a bit of updating. Keep your eyes out for more announcements on that.
Thanks, Matt. And the next one, which might actually come back to you again, Matt, but is just approximately in what time frame will changes to the data request be applied to tools like CMOR or Prepare to allow for proper data publication of data?
So CMOR itself, I believe, is already up to already able to produce data mapping to the new variable names. What we need to wait for is the CV's task team to confirm the global attributes and directly produce the MIP tables or the equivalent thereof that'll go with these variable definitions. That, again, wait for announcements to come on that.
And I believe they're going to do those tables after the next 1.2.2 release.
Yep. Yes. I'll try and drop into the Padlet an example of how to use the CMOR 3.10, which has got this functionality.
Thanks, Matt. Great. We're at the time and I don't see any other hands. So hopefully that means everything is crystal clear for everybody here. But if not, and you think of other questions in the meantime, please feel free to add them to the Padlet. We've got another session tomorrow, so we can address more questions. That's not a problem. So thank you so much, everybody, for joining. The slides from today, as well as the recording, will be made available on our event webpage, which Bryony shared the link to at the start of the meeting. So yeah, thanks everyone for joining, and have a lovely evening or morning, wherever it is for you.